before you close your eyes tonight, let me take you on a little journey. Section 1. The gate opens with hoofbeats. You arrive at a forest monastery where deer greet novices before the monks do. Not too far, really just a quiet walk through the early morning mist of an old sal forest in central India. You hear it before you see it. The faint chime of a bronze bell, the murmur of soft feet over damp earth, and something that sounds almost like breathing many breaths, gentle and synchronized, like an invisible audience waiting behind the trees. The gate ahead is low and wooden, more suggestion than barrier. Beyond it, a monastery. Nothing fancy, just stone paths, a few worn stupas, some prayer flags tangled in the upper branches, and deer, lots of deer, tall ones, small ones, even one with a crooked ear. They don't bolt when they see you. They don't even blink. They've been expecting you, it seems. One nudges your hip like an old friend. Another boulder sniffs your bag, clearly searching for molasses cubes. And a third, he simply walks ahead of you, slowly, as if leading you to morning prayers. It's a strange welcome party. But here, in this place, in this time, it's not unusual. You've just entered a forest monastery sometime around the 11th century, where vegetarian monks recite scripture by candlelight and share their breakfast with a herd of spotted deer. And no, they're not just there for decoration. They're part of the daily life. They're family. And occasionally, they're spiritual guides. You probably wouldn't survive a week here, not because it's dangerous, but because the deer will eat your bedding if you leave it unattended. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first gate wasn't built to keep anything out. That's obvious. It has no lock, no latch, just two stone posts with a beam across the top low enough for a person to duck under, high enough for a deer to walk beneath without thinking about it. It squeaks gently in the wind. But it's not wind that brushes your leg. It's fur. A young doe, maybe 2 years old, stares at you with eyes so wide and reflective they catch the sunrise in amber loops. She's not nervous. She's not tame either. She's comfortable, like she's seen dozens of travelers like you, wide-eyed and uncertain, arriving in search of something gentler than the world they left behind. Inside the outer garden, monks are already sweeping leaves, not because they have to, but because it clears the mind. The brooms are made from date palm ribs, tied with twine. You'll learn the rhythm eventually. Sweep, breathe, step, repeat. But this morning, you're just watching. One monk, wrapped in saffron cloth so faded it's nearly beige, stops mid-sweep to offer a quiet bow. A few deer have gathered around him, tails flicking. One licks his elbow, but he doesn't flinch. This place is quiet, but not silent. There's bird song layered in the background, bulbuls, magpies, a far-off peacock, and under it all, the barely there clatter of hooves on stone, like dry leaves shifting in a breeze. The deer move freely here, through the kitchens, through the scriptorium, even, sometimes, into the meditation hall, where they lie down on the cool stone floor like oversized cats. Nobody shoos them away. They're not trespassers. They're monks too, in a way. A carved plaque near the entrance features an inscription weathered but legible. It's a verse from an old Buddhist sutra, something about the oneness of all sentient beings. You've heard those words before, but they didn't hit quite as hard as they do now, when a fawn curls up beside the water bowl and sighs like a retired philosopher. There's a practical element. Of course, forest monasteries were often situated in wildlife-rich zones on purpose. Deer were part of the ecosystem. They kept the undergrowth trimmed. They warned of nearby predators, sometimes before the birds did, and more than once, they've led monks to lost travelers, sick villagers, or even abandoned infants. But beyond utility, there's affection, one that grew slowly, over centuries. According to old texts, some monasteries actively encouraged deer to stay. They left out salt, jaggery, warm mats, and the deer stayed. You pass under a banyan tree where a monk sits cross-legged in deep meditation. 2 bucks stand beside him, heads lowered, chewing quietly. You're not sure who's watching whom. One fringe theory, beloved by monastic storytellers but scoffed at by modern historians, claims that some deer were reincarnated souls of former monks. Watch how they listen. An elder might say, they remember the chants. Mainstream scholars, less convinced, but even they acknowledge the symbolic significance. Deer represent gentleness in Jain and Buddhist traditions. They were present at Buddha's first sermon, after all. In the deer park of Sarnath, you wander a little deeper, where the canopy thickens and the temperature drops. Stone benches line a reflecting pool, fed by a bamboo pipe that drips rhythmically. Here, a young monk is teaching a deer to nod on command. You don't ask why. You just watch, because, oddly, it seems to be working. There's a rustle behind you, more deer. Always more deer. You try counting them. 13, maybe 15. They move in and out of view like slow. Brown ghosts, some with white spots like faded constellations, others with scars that tell stories you'll never hear. And just when you think the moment couldn't get more dreamlike, a monk walks by carrying 2 large bowls, one of grain, the other of diced bananas. The deer swarm him gently, politely like regulars greeting their favorite chef. No pushing, no biting, just a slow, dignified feeding ritual that feels almost sacred. Some people chase enlightenment, the monk says softly, offering a bit of fruit to a particularly grumpy-looking buck. We just feed it bananas and sweep its path. You sit on a flat stone under the peepal tree and let the stillness seep into your bones. You're here now. The deer have accepted you, and the bells are about to ring again. Section 2. Morning bells and molasses treats. The day begins with temple bells, sweet offerings, and the rustle of deer among prayer mats. The bells don't clang. They bloom. It's the only way to describe them, rounded. Golden sounds that rise slowly in the air like steam off a morning bowl of barley porridge. You don't even realize they've begun until you feel something shift inside your chest, like a ripple through water that's been still too long. The deer notice before you do. Heads lift, ears swivel, a few stand up. Not because anyone told them to, but because the rhythm of this place is something they've long since internalized. You follow their lead, brushing dust from your robe still strange on your shoulders, still stiff in the elbows, and drift toward the kitchen courtyard. You're not alone. Dozens of monks gather under the neem trees, barefoot on packed earth, bowls in hand. The bowls are handmade, all slightly different. One has a crack sealed with metal staples. Another is dyed a soft red from years of turmeric stew. Yours still smells faintly of mustard seed. And the deer, they gather too, quietly, strategically. They know which monks have soft hearts and loose fingers. You watch one tall stag approach the oldest monk, probably the abbot himself, and gently tap his bowl with its nose. The monk says nothing. He just lifts a spoonful of mashed lentils and places it on a flat stone beside him. Deer diplomacy, you realize, is mostly about timing. Today's meal is simple: rice porridge, green graham curry, and slivers of roasted gourd. Some bowls also have a piece of jackfruit. Yours doesn't. No one minds. You sit beneath a sandalwood tree and observe the little ritual unfold. The monks eat in silence. But it's not strict silence. It's conversational quiet. The kind that allows for bird calls, the crunch of twigs, and the occasional impatient deer snort. One young buck attempts a clever maneuver, a slow sidestep behind a novice monk's robe, followed by a lightning-fast snatch of banana slice from an unattended bowl. The monk gasps. The deer bolts. The bowl clatters. Everyone freezes. Then the abbot chuckles. It's soft, barely more than breath, but it's permission enough for the courtyard to ripple with restrained, sleep-deprived giggles. Even the birds seem to join in. You glance down. Your own bowl is empty. When did that happen? A bell rings again, shorter this time. A signal, not for prayer, but for cleanup. You rise and rinse your bowl at the spout near the mango tree. The water is cold, but not jarring, and as you scrub gently with sand and rice husk, a fawn approaches and watches with the tilted curiosity of someone trying to understand modern plumbing. It becomes clear this place doesn't have an inside and outside world. Not really. There's no wild versus domestic. The boundaries here are softer than cloth. You could meditate under a tree and end up with a doe in your lap. You could read a sacred text and find hoofprints on the margins, hoofprints that no one erases. That blending has history behind it. According to a 10th century temple manual from the Chalukya period, now mostly eaten by mold and bugs. Naturally, some monasteries not only welcomed deer but actively recruited them. Monks scattered sesame seed paths through the forest. They built salt-licking stones beside lotus ponds. One account even mentions monks composing chants in low tones, meant to soothe nervous animals during the dry season. And it worked. A fringe tradition still survives in parts of Odisha and Gujarat. Monastic deer calls. Low, rhythmic hums paired with offerings of mung bean cakes. Historians still argue whether this practice was functional or symbolic. One school insists it was just an exercise in mindfulness. Another swears deer would appear within minutes. But you've seen enough today to know that truth here doesn't always wear a scholar's robe. Later, during the mid-morning lull, you help prepare the next offering, a mixture of jaggery, roasted chickpeas, and ghee rolled into balls. It's meant for both monks and animals. Balance, after all. You roll yours too tightly and it cracks. A deer walks by, sniffs your failure, and keeps moving. Humbled, you try again. Nearby, an older monk named Kamalananda tells you a story as he rolls sweets with practiced hands. It's about the time a particularly bold deer snuck into the main prayer hall during a full moon ceremony and tried to eat the ceremonial garland straight off the Buddha statue. No one stopped him. The monks paused their chants, watched as the deer slowly chewed the sacred flowers, then simply picked up where they left off. That deer, Kamalananda says with a grin, was further along the path than most of us. You laugh, then stop, because the deer from earlier, the one that greeted you at the gate, is back, and she's just laid down beside your feet. She sighs, you sigh, And for the first time in what feels like days or centuries, you don't feel like a guest anymore. You feel included. It's a curious intimacy. This cohabitation. No rules, no commands, just coexistence. Like two species sharing a rhythm neither fully invented. The abbot passes by once more and glances at your little scene. He nods. Not at you. At the deer. She nods back. Section 3. Why the deer stayed. Explore the ecological and spiritual reasons deer made monasteries their home. You wake not with a start, but with a sort of peaceful confusion. There's light coming through the latticework now, golden dappled, and there's warm breath on your arm. You don't panic. That wouldn't do any good here. Instead, you turn your head slowly and find yourself nose to nose with a doe. She's chewing something, slowly, thoughtfully. Probably one of the fig leaves you left near your mat last night. She doesn't blink. Neither do you. You both just exist for a moment. Then she stands, stretches legs long and delicate as reeds, and wanders off toward the prayer garden, hooves ticking softly on the stone. This is normal now. You sit up and stretch, your joints popping in protest. Sleep on a reed mat isn't exactly luxury, but it's gentler on your spine than you expected. Plus, the background soundscape, birds, bells, and the occasional deer snort is oddly soothing. Today is your first assigned work day. Tasks rotate here. No one's above sweeping or compost duty. You're given the compost. Specifically, you're assigned to carry offerings from the kitchen to the outer mound. Easy enough. But halfway through your first trip, you discover the flaw in the system. The deer. They know. They always know. The moment you step outside with a woven basket full of scraps, cooked lentils, chopped radish peels, turmeric roots, and leftover jackfruit rinds, they're there. 3, then 5. Then 11 of them, flanking you like furry, hooved security guards with one very simple demand. Hand over the goods. You try bargaining. You try speed. You try ducking through a narrow gate. It's useless. By the time you reach the compost heap, most of the basket is empty and your robes are dotted with slobber. Later, when you report the failed delivery to the quartermaster, he simply laughs and marks it down as donated to the gentle residents. No one's mad. The deer are part of the budget. It turns out, deer economics is an entire subfield of monastery management. There are ledgers, not many, and they're more poetic than practical, where monks recorded how much ghee was diverted to animal snacks, how many prayer rugs had been chewed into fringe, and whether it was worth planting sacred tulsi bushes again despite last year's browsing disaster. There's even one record tucked between travel logs from a monk named Srikantha that simply says, "New deer arrived, smaller than the others, follows bells, favorite food, rice with salt. Named him Quiet Leaf." Historians still argue whether that was a real entry or a kind of spiritual metaphor. But given the paw prints and the rice-stained corner, it feels pretty literal. After compost duty, you join the monks in sweeping the north path, the one lined with flowering shrubs and prayer flags. It's supposed to be meditative, and it is, until a young fawn decides your broom is a threat and tries to wrestle it away from you. What follows is 10 minutes of the most gentle slapstick comedy the world has ever seen. You, tugging a palm frond broom, the fawn, determined, the monks, giggling behind their sleeves. Eventually, the abbot steps in, offers the deer a ball of sugar-cane pulp, and you get your broom back slightly damp, but victorious. You find yourself wondering, not for the first time, why no one's written more about this. Why is this odd little deer-monk dynamic so overlooked? Sure, you've seen paintings, Ajanta murals with animals at Buddha's feet. You've read about the Sarnath sermons and the symbolic use of deer in Buddhist texts. But this, the daily life, the practical absurdity of sharing a dormitory with 6 ruminants, it's not glamorous, but it's unforgettable. And it's not just about the deer being there. It's about the subtle way they shift the rhythm of everything. Meditations become softer, meals become shared, boundaries become blurred, not in a chaotic way, but like dye spreading through water. You remember Kamalananda's words from yesterday. Some people chase enlightenment. We just feed it bananas. You're beginning to understand. There's one moment so quiet you almost miss it when you see a monk kneel beside a limping fawn. He doesn't speak. He just sits there, hands open, breathing. After a few minutes, the fawn lays her head against his thigh. Nothing is done. Nothing is fixed. But everything is better. Scholars often ask, were these deer domesticated? But that's not quite right. They were trusted, and trust, in this place, is thicker than doctrine. As the sun climbs higher, you retreat beneath a banyan canopy where a few deer have dozed off in an accidental circle. You lie down in the center, careful not to wake them, and close your eyes. A breeze rustles the leaves. Somewhere, a monk begins to chant, and just before sleep tugs you under. You feel a soft nudge against your shoulder. A fawn, watching, breathing. You're not dreaming yet, but you're close. Section 4. Buddha's footprint and the sacred herd. Linking the monastic deer tradition to ancient tales of Buddha's deer park sermons, you wake to chanting. Low and rhythmic, it rolls like water over stones smooth. Steady and hypnotic, it doesn't come from one voice, but many, braided together so tightly that you can't tell where one ends and another begins. The deer haven't moved much. A few still doze around you, legs tucked beneath their bellies like folded laundry. One is chewing in its sleep. Another twitches its ears at flies, but stays motionless otherwise. You rise slowly, so as not to disturb the delicate geometry of this spontaneous circle, and pad barefoot toward the sound. It's coming from the main hall. You hesitate at the threshold, not because you're unwelcome, but because of what's inside. The hall is open on 3 sides, shaded by a wide clay tile roof. A few slender pillars hold it up, carved with vines, birds, and somewhere near the back, a very smug-looking squirrel. The monks are seated in neat rows, all facing a simple stone altar at the far end, and around them, as if positioned with deliberate care, deer. 4 by the left column, 2 near the altar, 1 curled at the abbot's feet like a sleepy cat. And none of them are disruptive. They're just there, still, watching. It's hard not to read meaning into it, even though modern scholars would warn you against anthropomorphizing, even though zoologists might call it coincidence or conditioning. Still, there's something uncanny in the way one deer lifts its head when the monks reach a specific verse. One you don't understand, but feel anyway. Some traditions say deer can sense purity of thought. Others suggest they're drawn to tonal frequencies used in Vedic chanting. A few bold researchers think it's just the smell of breakfast rice wafting in from the kitchen. Historians still argue whether this integration was intentional, symbolic, or simply circumstantial. But here, now, the debate doesn't matter. You sit in the back row and let the sound wash over you. The chant rises and falls, then softens into a slow breath in, out. In again until the last syllable hangs in the air like a bell that's forgotten how to fade. Silence returns, but it's not empty. It's full, heavy with presence. You feel it settle on your shoulders like a shawl. And then, of course, a deer sneezes. Loudly. The monks crack smiles. One coughs to hide a laugh. And the moment breaks not irreverently, but lovingly. Like a bubble popping just to prove it existed. You spend the rest of the morning in the scriptorium. It's cooler there. Shaded. The walls are lined with palm leaf manuscripts. Inked in meticulous lines with homemade black dye, a mix of lamp soot and tamarind seed paste. You're here to assist, which mostly means turning pages, cleaning brushes, and very importantly, shooing away deer who mistake the scroll rack for a snack buffet. There's one in particular. You've named him Ink Lip. He's fascinated by the calligraphy station. Possibly because the ink smells like molasses. Possibly because he enjoys watching the brush dance. Hard to say. Twice you have to pull a manuscript out of his mouth. Once, you're too slow. And a 12th century prayer to Avalokiteshvara now ends with teeth marks and a little bit of slobber. The scribe shrugs. The Dharma survives, he says. Even with bite marks. You take a break by the lotus pond. It's an old part of the monastery overgrown at the edges. The stones worn smooth by centuries of bare feet. Here, the deer gather to drink, their muzzles dipping with the grace of practiced ceremony. You spot a mother and fawn. The little one is still shaky on its legs, but it follows anyway, nudging the lotus leaves with soft, confused sniffs. She's learning, the way you are. Back at the pond's edge, an elderly monk is sketching. Not calligraphy this time, just outlines. A deer's profile. A curving neck. A hoof raised mid-step. His lines are clean, quick, confident. You sit beside him. He doesn't mind. You know, he says without looking up. Deer have always been here. You nod. No, I mean always. He pauses. Before us. Before the bricks. Before the chance. This place belonged to them first. You think about that. About what it means to be a guest, not just of a monastery, but of a moment in time. A moment that includes hoofprints on scrolls, fur in food bowls, and silence interrupted by the occasional sneeze. That evening, you help with evening preparations. Lamps are lit, floors swept, bowls cleaned and set out for both monks and deer. The division between the two becomes softer each day. At the back of the temple, you find a small stone basin filled with water and flower petals. You don't know who placed it there. But as the deer approach, one by one, to drink from it, you realize it doesn't matter. What matters is that someone thought to make it. Kindness, here, is embedded in architecture. The sun sets without drama, just a gentle dimming of color. The bells chime again. Somewhere behind you, a deer exhales and lies down on the step beside your mat. You join her. 2 breaths, in sync, and then sleep. Section 5. Tea, dust, and antler shadows. Daily chores unfold among calmly intrusive deer who chew manuscripts if you're careless. Morning in the forest doesn't arrive like an alarm clock. It seeps in, slowly, quietly, one shaft of golden light at a time. A few lazy bird calls, a breeze that smells like marigold and old bricks, and eventually the soft, deliberate clop of hooves on flagstones. You're already half awake when the first deer wanders past your mat. She pauses, glances at you, and flicks her tail. Not exactly a greeting, but not one either. The mat beneath you is warm from sleep. The air above it is cool from dawn. It's a good sandwich of sensations. You stay there a moment longer, soaking in the stillness, until your stomach betrays you with a low, unmistakable growl. Food first. The monastery kitchen is already alive, but gently so. No shouting, no frantic chopping, just a calm ballet of motion, ladles scraping clay pots, rice being rinsed in stone bowls, a rhythmic thunk of turmeric roots being split with a flat rock. Today, you're assigned to herb sorting, a task that sounds simple until you're faced with 3 baskets of vaguely leafy, fragrant chaos. You sit cross-legged on the shaded kitchen threshold, a pile of dried brahmi leaves in one hand, and immediately, a deer appears. It's a young one, still lanky, still surprised by the concept of doors. He nudges your knee, then your hand, then the entire basket, as if to ask, "Do you know what this is?" You push him gently aside, but he doesn't leave. Instead, he curls up next to you, still staring at the herbs like he's trying to recall a recipe he once knew in a past life. "Don't give him tulsi," one of the kitchen monks warns from across the courtyard. It makes him sneeze. Noted. As you work, you fall into conversation with an older monk named Dhanapala. He's one of those soft-spoken types who moves like he's always mid-bow. He tells you that, long ago, it was believed that deer could detect medicinal plants by scent alone. "One wandered into the apothecary garden once," he says, "and only nibbled the leaves used for fever. That's when we started paying closer attention to what they ate." That may or may not be true. Historians still debate whether these observations were science, superstition, or simply wishful thinking wrapped in parables. But even skeptics admit there's a curious overlap between the plants deer favored and the ones monks used for poultices. After herb duty, you follow Dhanapala to a grove behind the monastery where wild ginger, tame, and brahmi grow thick along the path. The monks harvest carefully, no uprooting, just leaves, trimmed with the reverence of someone cutting hair, not stems. You help. And of course, the deer help too, by which you mean they follow along and periodically interrupt the process by trying to eat your collection bowl. It's not sabotage, it's just curiosity. There's one buck in particular who seems unusually attentive. He watches Dhanapala's every move with the intensity of a student monk. When Dhanapala chants a low mantra before snipping a sprig of tulsi, the buck lowers his head, as if in echo. "His name is Banu," the monk whispers. "Means sunlight. He was born here. Probably thinks he owns the place. You believe it, the way he struts around the herb garden like a supervisor, sniffing each pile of leaves, sometimes approving with a snort, sometimes knocking over a bowl with clear disapproval. It's managerial behavior if you've ever seen it. By midday, the work is done. The herbs are laid out to dry on wide mats under the sun. The deer wander off, some to nap, some to poke their noses into the laundry area, and one, for reasons unknown, to stand motionless inside an empty water barrel like it's a new religion. You eat under a fig tree sticky rice, lentils, and a round, spicy pickle you're warned not to give to any animal, monk or deer. The shade is deep here, cool and thick like river water. A breeze lifts the edges of your robes. The fig leaves tremble overhead. You think back to something Kamalananda said yesterday. Compassion begins where borders end. It makes more sense now, not because you've read more texts or studied more doctrine, but because today a deer shared your bench. Not aggressively, not even intentionally. She just sat there, hooves tucked, ears twitching, breath slow, For 15 minutes, neither of you moved. It wasn't a moment of enlightenment. It wasn't a parable. It was lunch, but it felt complete. That afternoon, during a brief thunderstorm, you help move the drying herbs inside. The rain is soft at first, then insistent. The air smells like pepper and wet bark. And the deer, they shelter wherever they please. Some press against the kitchen walls. Some squeeze under the eaves of the scriptorium. A few simply stand in the rain, heads bowed, blinking at the sky like confused sages. You find yourself standing beside Banu again. You don't say anything. Neither does he. But the two of you watch the rain fall together, breathing in sync, watching as the droplets gather on the lotus pond and ripple outward. You're not sure who learns more from whom in this arrangement. You only know that you don't want to leave it. Section 6. Deer in the Vinaya rules. Monastic codes mention pets surprisingly often, especially ones with hooves. By now, the deer have stopped being background. They're not just part of the scenery. They're part of the rhythm, and they've begun to show up in your dreams. Last night, you dreamt you were chanting in the hall. But every monk had antlers. No one acknowledged it. The chanting continued, calm as ever, and when the bell rang, everyone bowed antlers and all and vanished into the mist. You wake smiling, and maybe a little disoriented. It's your turn for meditation duty today, which sounds peaceful until you realize it means 6 uninterrupted hours of seated stillness, punctuated only by bells, breath, and the occasional beetle crawling up your sleeve. The meditation hall is open to the east, shaded with hanging vines and old carvings. You pick your spot near a wall, not too close to the pillar where birds tend to argue and settle in. Legs folded, hands loose, eyes barely closed. The deer are already there. Of course they are. Banu, the one with the attitude of a middle manager, sits facing the altar. 2 younger ones lie near the door, half asleep. One seems to have taken up permanent residence near a broken statue of Tara, his chin propped elegantly on her stone foot, and they are silent. Not just still silent. No shuffling, no snorting, no chewing. You count 12 minutes before the first movement. And even then, it's just an ear twitch. It's unnerving and inspiring. You try to follow their lead. Breath in, breath out. Time dilates. 1 hour passes. Maybe. You think. It's hard to tell when your feet fall asleep before your mind does. You're just about to adjust your posture when a snuffling sound breaks the trance. It's not loud, but in this sea of silence, it echoes. You crack open one eye and spot a young fawn brown, speckled, impossibly gangly, nosing at the robes of a monk 2 rows ahead of you. She seems confused by his stillness. Maybe she thinks he's fallen asleep upright. She sniffs again, licks his knee. He doesn't flinch. She curls up beside him with a long sigh, as if to say, "Fine, I'll wait." No one reacts, because here, this is normal. You close your eye and keep breathing. Midway through the second session, you reach a place in your mind that's soft around the edges. Not empty, just unbothered. The sounds around you fade. Even the deer seem distant, more presence than pressure. And that's when it happens. Something brushes against your shoulder. Light, barely there. You think maybe it's the wind, until a slow, warm breath hits your ear. You open your eyes, just a little, and see her, the same doe from the garden, the one who's been following you quietly, consistently for days now. She stands beside you, calm and completely unafraid. She leans down and sniffs the crown of your head, gently. like you're an old manuscript she's thinking about reading. Then, just as gently, she walks away. Your heart keeps pace with your breath, but only just. When the final bell rings, you rise on aching knees, unsure if what just happened was a test, a blessing, or simply breakfast reconnaissance. You ask Kamalananda about it later. He shrugs. Deer visit who they like, he says. Don't take it personally, but also, maybe do. There's a story he tells you as you help him clean the incense bowls, about a monk, centuries ago, who achieved samadhi, deep meditative absorption while a deer rested its head in his lap. They remained that way for 7 hours. When he came out of it, the deer had passed away. They say she was waiting. Kamalananda adds softly, she needed someone still enough to go with her. Historians, of course, scoff at this one. There's no written record, no inscriptions, just oral tradition and the tendency of monks to imbue everyday events with cosmic meaning. Still, you find yourself looking at the deer differently, not as pets, not as spiritual metaphors, but as participants, partners in stillness. You ask to visit the Vinaya library after lunch, a stone room near the back of the compound, where copies of the monks' behavioral codes are stored. The air smells like dust and cloves. The manuscripts are brittle, ink faded, some chewed at the edges. One mentions animals explicitly. Not many times, but enough. There are passages forbidding cruelty, encouraging kindness, advising against excessive attachment. One passage stands out. It's written in a flowing script. Difficult to decipher, but the monk translating it for you offers a soft summary. If an animal comes to you in peace, it is already your teacher. You sit with that for a while. Outside, the deer graze quietly. One is trying to eat the laundry again. Another is attempting to fit her entire body into a clay pot. Your teacher is currently stuck. You go to help, and she lets you. That night, you return to your mat beneath the banyan tree. The stars are out, though faint through the leaves. Somewhere nearby, someone is chanting quietly. A deer lies down beside you. Not touching, just present. You close your eyes, and the world soft, patient, and hoofed keeps spinning quietly. Section 7. A meditation. Interrupted by nibbling, you attempt silent reflection, only to be nuzzled mid-breath by a curious fawn. There's something oddly comforting about waking up and immediately seeing a deer chewing a sandal. Not yours. Thankfully, someone left theirs outside the bathhouse, and a particularly curious buck is giving it the once-over, flipping it over with his nose, then gently gnawing the strap like it might be some forgotten vegetable. You sit up, stretch, and wince as your back cracks like old parchment. Bath day. The monastery bathhouse isn't exactly a luxury spa. It's a long, low building with clay-tiled walls, open at the top to let out steam. Hot water is drawn from sun-warmed copper pots, and the soap is a scratchy ball of ash, citrus peel, and powdered neem bark. You're barely halfway through scrubbing your arm when a deer strolls in. Just strolls in. She pauses, watches you scrub, then lowers her head to sip from a runoff bucket. Nobody reacts. No one tries to shoo her. This is, apparently, routine. And you just keep scrubbing. The deer watches you for a moment longer. Then, satisfied you're not wasting water, moves on. When you emerge, towel slung across your shoulders. The sun has climbed higher. The flagstones are warm beneath your feet, and the smell of sandalwood smoke drifts from somewhere near the prayer hall. You take a long, slow walk around the outer compound, past the medicine garden, the compost pits, the shrine to a tree older than recorded time. The deer are everywhere, but not in the way they used to be. You no longer notice them as separate from the place. They're like wind or shadows. They belong. But today, you're tasked with something different, caring for the injured. A novice monk named Shuba leads you to a quiet paddock near the edge of the grounds. It's shaded by neem trees and ringed with a low fence made from woven bamboo. Inside, 2 deer. One is young, with a pronounced limp and a bandaged hind leg. The other is older, eyes clouded slightly with age, chewing slowly through a pile of banana peels. You're handed a bowl of warm water, a rag, and a small pot of medicinal paste that smells strongly of camphor and turmeric. It's time to earn your place. Shuba shows you how to approach slowly, sideways. No direct eye contact. You kneel beside the limping fawn and wait. After a moment, she inches closer, then closer. Then she licks your sleeve. It's not a formal acceptance, but it'll do. You clean the wound gently, re-wrap the leg, and apply a small smear of paste along the fur. The deer flinches, but doesn't pull away. Trust is quiet here, earned in movements, not words. Shuba tells you stories as you work. There was a time, centuries ago, when an epidemic swept through the forest. Not human sickness, some kind of hoof rot or fungal blight. The monks treated dozens of deer over 2 months, learning as they went. Their notes, written in the margins of medical scrolls, are still kept in a locked chest beneath the shrine. Some scholars argue whether these records qualify as veterinary science. Others dismiss them as spiritual allegory. But within the monastery, they're considered sacred knowledge. And somewhere among those ancient palm leaf pages, there's an account of a monk who slept every night beside a sick deer for 13 days until it could walk again. Not a miracle. Shuba says, just presence. You stay in the paddock for hours, feeding, cleaning, watching. The deer nap in patches of sunlight. Occasionally one snorts, or rolls onto its side with a soft grunt. You begin to recognize their sounds: anxious, curious, sleepy, hungry. There's even one noise that seems to mean, this plant is gross. Later in the afternoon, an older monk arrives carrying a jar of honey and a small reed flute. You raise an eyebrow. Music helps, he says simply, and begins to play. Not a tune, exactly. More of a pattern. A soft trill, a pause, a longer note. The deer lift their heads. One stands, walks over, and rests its muzzle on the monk's knee. He plays on, never-changing expression. There's a serenity to it that borders on the surreal. You sit very still, and for a while, that's enough. When the sun dips lower, you return to the main compound. Your robes are dusty, your hands smell like herbs and fur, but your heart feels quieter. In the dining hall, you take your usual spot near the back, where the breeze slips through the columns and carries the smell of cumin and tamarind. You eat slowly. A deer walks by. You share a bit of papaya. No one speaks. It's a silence filled with understanding. That night, as you settle beneath your tree, a familiar presence curls beside you. It's the fawn from the paddock. Her bandage is fresh. Her breath is even. She doesn't nuzzle, doesn't lick, just lies there, close enough for her warmth to meet yours. The stars appear, faint behind clouds. You listen to her breathing. You match it with your own. And somewhere between inhale and exhale, you fall asleep. Section 8. Rice bowls and salty ears. Feeding time means sorting out which deer like mung beans and which demand jaggery. The next morning begins not with a bell, but with a very unexpected tug at your blanket. You blink awake to find Banu, yes. That Banu chewing the corner of your bedding like it's his personal breakfast buffet. He stops when you look at him, flicks one ear lazily, and wanders off with absolutely no remorse. You sit up, yawn, and inspect the damage. Just a small corner missing. You can still use it. Probably. Maybe. When you shuffle into the courtyard, rubbing your eyes, you hear the laughter before you see the cause. A deer is standing in the middle of the laundry area wearing someone's freshly washed robe, well draped in it. The garment is tangled around its antlers like a fancy turban. It stands completely still, majestic and oblivious, as if waiting to be crowned the next abbot. 3 monks are trying to coax it into returning the robe. One offers banana slices. Another tries untying the sash without making sudden movements. The third just sits cross-legged nearby, murmuring verses of acceptance and possibly resignation. This is not unusual. Spring has arrived, and with it, the deer have become spirited. This is what Kamalananda calls the pollen season of mischief. You see it everywhere, in the way the young bucks race through the compound at full gallop, kicking up clouds of dust that settle in sacred bowls, in the way fawns now treat clay water pots as personal trampolines, in the way Banu has taken to sneaking into the meditation hall just to loudly exhale during silent sitting. And still, the monks love them. You help with laundry today, no robes. Thankfully, just simple cloths and bedding. The soap is made from fermented rice husks and ash, mixed with a few drops of mustard oil. You're scrubbing away at a particularly stubborn patch of something unidentifiable when 2 deer wander over and begin drinking from the rinse bucket. You try to shoo them. They ignore you. You flick a bit of water at them. They blink slowly, unimpressed. You finally surrender and move to a different bucket. Across the courtyard, someone's chanting. The tune is light, almost playful. Not one of the usual mantras. You follow the sound and find a monk serenading a group of deer with a bamboo flute, and what appears to be a lullaby about jackfruit. It's oddly effective. The deer gather, eyes half-lidded, chewing slowly like cows in a dream. You ask about it later. Oh, yes, the monk says. Some of them like music. Some prefer silence. One of them, he points to a tall, sleepy-eyed stag, will only respond to Vedic hymns in Sanskrit. Snob. The deer flicks an ear. Coincidence? Perhaps not. Scholars have occasionally documented these seasonal behaviors, noting how the arrival of spring seemed to energize both monks and animals. One surviving scroll from a Gujarat monastery mentions, with no small irritation, the annual festival of robe stealing, during which deer routinely absconded with laundry, prayer flags, and once, the abbot's dinner. The line ends with, "This, too, is part of the practice." You begin to understand why monks never spoke of enlightenment as a straight path. Some days, it looks more like picking up fawn droppings while trying to recall a verse about compassion. Still, there's a lightness to everything. After lunch, you help repair a fence the deer have once again trampled not out of malice, just because a particularly round one tried to squeeze through a too small gap and took half the frame with him. The monk you're working with ties the bamboo posts back together with palm fiber and hums as he works. "These creatures remind us," he says, "not to take ourselves too seriously." He gestures to your work, and that nothing stays fixed for long. A pair of deer come over to supervise. One noses the tools, The other attempts to chew your sandal strap. Again, you sigh. But it's not an annoyed sigh anymore. It's the sigh of someone who has accepted that nature is not interested in tidiness. Later that day, a ceremony is held under the jackfruit tree. A new monk is taking his vows. The courtyard is swept. Lamps are lit. Saffron robes rustle like leaves in a gentle wind. The deer gather at the perimeter, respectful, quiet, almost reverent. You watch one lower its head as the abbot speaks. When the vows are completed and the chanting ends, the new monk bows and one of the deer steps forward and licks his hand. No one orchestrated that. No one could have. But it feels right. Later, as dusk settles, you sit alone in the herb garden. The air is rich with the smell of crushed basil and newly turned soil. A deer stands nearby, nibbling at the edge of a marigold bed. You speak softly, mostly to yourself. Something about the strangeness of it all, about how the border between human and animal, sacred and silly, just doesn't exist here. Not really. The deer doesn't reply. Of course not. But she stays, and when you finally stand to leave, she walks with you just a few steps behind, like a companion who has no questions and no need for answers. That night, you tuck your blanket tightly under your mat, just in case. But Bhanu doesn't chew it. He just stands nearby, watching, guarding. Section 9. The monk who spoke deer. One elder seems to genuinely converse with the animals. You're not entirely sure he's joking. You're sent out on a task today, not far, just to the edge of the forest, where the monks gather wood and check on the outer shrine. But it feels like a departure. You haven't left the inner compound in over a week. The idea of walking alone, without bells or bowls or gentle deer underfoot, is almost unsettling. You're given a small pouch of puffed rice, a walking stick just in case, and instructions that are both precise and vague. Look for fallen branches, not dead trees. Speak softly, even when alone. If you meet the deer with the white ear, follow her. Right. You head out through the eastern gate. The air is cooler here, thick with the scent of bamboo and dry moss. Leaves crackle under your feet. Sunlight filters through the canopy in thin, golden ribbons. You're about 20 minutes into your walk when you hear it. A rustle, a low huff, then the unmistakable sound of hooves on soft ground. You pause. From behind a cluster of sal trees, she appears tall, slender, and unmistakably marked with a single white patch on her left ear. She looks at you, not toward you, at you. Then she turns and walks. You hesitate, then follow. She doesn't hurry, doesn't check to see if you're behind her, just leads, weaving through the underbrush like someone who's done this before, which, clearly, she has. She takes you down an unseen path, through tall grass and past a stone marker nearly swallowed by vines. The inscription is worn to near nothingness, but you catch one symbol, an old glyph for stillness or wait. Eventually, she stops. You find yourself in a clearing. At its center, a crumbling platform of carved stone, half covered in moss. A shrine, old, forgotten, but not unloved. Flowers grow here, wild ones, blue and yellow, with curling petals and no apparent pattern. You recognize a few. Tulsi, turmeric bloom, and one that looks suspiciously like the flower Kamalananda tucks behind his ear during festivals. The deer walks to the platform, lowers her head, and grazes beside it. You sit. There's no great revelation, no vision, just quiet, and the realization that this place has been visited thousands of times, not marked on any map, not noted in any scroll, but worn smooth by footsteps and hooves. You remember something Dhanapala once said, almost in passing. Not every sacred place was built. Some were simply agreed upon. You don't know what agreement was made here. But it holds. You spend an hour there, maybe two, watching, listening, breathing. When you finally stand to leave, the deer doesn't move, just watches. Her head tilts slightly, less like a farewell and more like a question. Back at the monastery, the sun has tilted toward afternoon. The laundry flaps gently. The compost smells oddly sweet. You return your stick, your pouch of unused rice, and sit quietly beside the herb garden for a long while. Kamalananda joins you. You followed her, he says. Not as a question. You nod. She always leads someone there, just once. He doesn't explain further. Just pats your shoulder and leaves behind a slice of guava wrapped in a leaf. That night, during evening prayer, you sit beside Banu again. He's restless tonight, tail flicking, eyes alert. But he stays. And as the monks chant verses in a rising cadence, you close your eyes and see moss-covered stone, wildflowers, a white-eared guide, and you feel held, not just by the ritual or the robes or the walls, but by the living, breathing presence of this place, by what the deer know, and what they choose to share. Sleep finds you before the last bell rings. Section 10. Healing with hooves nearby. Sick monks recover beneath neem trees, with deer acting as warm, furry footrests. The monastic infirmary is not a place most people notice until they need it. Tucked behind the herb-drying racks and shaded by an ancient neem tree, it's little more than a lean-to with woven reed walls, 2 low pallets, and a shelf full of pastes, poultices, and scrolls that smell faintly of sesame and camphor. You're not sick. But today, you're on healing duty, which means assisting the infirmary monk, sweeping the space, fetching warm water, and learning the delicate art of applying turmeric salve without getting it all over your robes. And, of course, managing the deer. Because yes, there are deer patients too. One of them is already there when you arrive. A small doe with a broken foreleg, resting beneath the window with her injured limb delicately outstretched. Her breath is slow. Her eyes are half-lidded. Next to her lies a monk older, with a soft rattle to his breath and a bandage around his ribs. The two of them lie head to head, like mirror images drawn from 2 different scriptures. No one comments on this. It's ordinary here. Your job starts with warm compresses. You're shown how to soak a cloth in herbal water infused with coriander, ginger root, and something that smells faintly of lemongrass, then wring it out just right. Not too dry, not dripping. You apply the cloth to the monk's side while another novice tends to the deer. She flinches slightly, then relaxes into it with a sigh that sounds exactly like what you'd make if someone rubbed your shoulders after a long day of planting rice. Between tasks, you ask the infirmary monk, a quiet man named Jivanta, how long this tradition of animal care has existed here. He pauses in the middle of grinding sandalwood bark and says, always. He means it. Not just centuries. Not just since some old abbot decided deer were holy. He means it in the bone-deep way that people speak about rivers or mountains, things that have no starting point in memory because they've simply always been. Later, he shows you a scroll flaking, ink faded, but still readable. It tells of a drought, maybe 300 years ago. The monks survived by eating boiled tree bark and crushed lotus seeds. The deer, unable to forage, grew thin and desperate. The monks rationed water half for themselves, half for the herd. No one died. And when the rains returned, the deer stayed. That part is written in red ink, as if whoever copied it knew. This is the part that matters. You glance over to the injured doe. Her leg has been gently bound in reeds and silk, splinted with curved wood taken from a broken broom. A young monk fans her slowly with a palm leaf. She's blinking more now, more alert, more here. Jivanta brews you a cup of herbal tea, thin, bitter, oddly comforting. You sit under the neem tree to drink it. A deer approaches, not to beg for food, just to stand beside you. His fur is rougher than the others, older. His movements are careful. He doesn't nudge or sniff or investigate. He just exists beside you, like a comma in a sentence you didn't know needed pausing. And you pause. You stay like that for a while. Eventually, you help sweep the floors again, replace the water pots, fold a clean cloth for the next patient, whether monk or deer. It doesn't matter. The infirmary monk gives you a small nod of approval, not praise, just acknowledgement, like a gentle tap on the shoulder of your soul. Before you leave, you glance once more at the scroll shelf. Some of those texts are bound with twine. Others are simply rolled into clay tubes. Many are marked with hoof prints, literal ones, pressed into the margins like messy signatures. Or maybe just a deer who stepped where they weren't supposed to. Jivanta catches your eye. We don't clean those off, he says. They're part of the record. That night, you help carry the injured doe back to her usual spot near the banyan tree. She limps, but slowly, proudly. You walk beside her, one hand out not to guide, just to accompany. At your mat, Panu is already curled up nearby. He doesn't acknowledge you. He just snorts softly, as if to say, "Took you long enough. You lie down." The injured doe settles beside you, nose tucked beneath her flank. And as the stars appear one by one, tentative and pale, you close your eyes, surrounded by breath and fur and the faint smell of neem. No prayers, no chanting, just presence. Section 11. How deer taught compassion. The monks say empathy deepens when you must forgive a creature for eating your sandal. The deer are watching the rain. It began sometime after midnight, soft, tentative, like someone tapping gently on the edge of a thought. By dawn, it's steady, persistent. The air is cool, soaked through with petrichor and the sleepy perfume of soaked turmeric leaves. You're standing under the covered corridor that loops around the inner courtyard, staring out at the misty downpour. 3 deer are with you, Banu, of course, and 2 younger does. All of them are absolutely riveted by the water. Not scared, not even cautious, just contemplative. Banu sticks out his tongue to catch a drop. It lands squarely between his eyes instead. He sneezes and blinks like a monk who's just been splashed during a water blessing. You almost expect him to bow afterward. Rain days at the monastery move differently. Everything slows. No sweeping, no laundry, no herb drying. The scriptures stay rolled. The gardens rest. Even the insects seem to pause, huddled under curled leaves. You're reassigned to inventory duty, which is not glamorous. But it does mean entering the archive a low, circular building with thick clay walls and a thatched roof designed to survive both monsoon and mischief. You're there to help count the sealed scrolls. The room smells like parchment and pepper. It's dim, lit only by slatted windows and 2 flickering oil lamps. A few monks sit cross-legged, methodically unrolling, checking, re-rolling, and noting the contents on clay tablets with styluses dipped in soot ink. You take a bundle from the shelf. Inside, a palm leaf manuscript, bound with gold thread, speckled with ink smudges and one perfect deer hoof print in the corner. You laugh quietly. The monk next to you smiles. "They like the ink room," he says. "Warm floor, smells sweet." He pauses, then adds, "And once, one of them walked in during a recitation. Didn't leave until we finished the chapter." You don't ask what chapter. It doesn't matter. The story's in the staying. Around midday, a monk brings in ginger tea and a tray of roasted barley. You sit with him near the doorway, sharing the tea, staring out at the damp courtyard. A deer walks by, slowly, soaked, but unbothered. He stops, turns, and steps inside. No one moves. He shakes off not dramatically, just a careful twitch, and walks between the scroll racks. He sniffs one pile, steps over another, settles in the corner, tucks his legs under, and sighs. Everyone goes back to work. It's hard to explain how normal this feels now. That afternoon, you're invited to help with the scroll restoration table, an honor typically reserved for senior students. You're told it's because you have steady hands and good listening ears. Translation: you're quiet. And the deer, like you learn how to grind tamarind seed paste into a sealant, how to press palm leaves between slabs of oiled stone, how to use a thread soaked in acacia gum to bind a text that's older than most trees in the forest. One scroll in particular catches your eye, not because of the words, although the script is fine, tight, like ant tracks, but because of the smudges along its edge. There's a pattern. You hold it up to the light. Not random, not damage. A trail, tiny hoof prints, pressed faintly into the dried paste, curling around the text like punctuation. You point it out to the restoration monk. He leans in, squints, and smiles. He says, "That was probably Golden Toes. She used to walk across everything, had a limp, always favored her left side." He pauses. "She's buried under the neem tree." You blink. How long ago? He thinks, 80, 90 years. Maybe. You look again at the scroll. The ink is still crisp. Golden Toes is still walking across it. That evening, after the rain eases, the deer emerge in slow waves. They shake out their coats, flick their ears, nose the puddles. You watch from the steps, sipping the last of your tea. Banu walks past. He doesn't stop, but he glances at you. A brief moment, like punctuation. That night, your mat smells faintly of damp bark and mustard oil. You don't mind. The air is soft. The night is gentle. The deer are quiet. You dream of hoof prints on wet parchment. Section 12. The dangers of over-attachment. Affection is holy, attachment is not. A lesson learned the hard way with a limping doe. You've begun to understand the rhythm of the days, not as a schedule, but as a kind of shared breath. Some mornings feel full of motion, like a yawn stretching across the whole compound. Others, like today, are quiet, not sleepy, just interior. The sky is overcast. The air is warm but weightless, like cloth that's been washed and left to dry under shade. You're assigned to afternoon chant duty in the west garden. It's one of the oldest corners of the monastery, less maintained, more overgrown, the walls leaning a little like monks deep in contemplation. There's a mossy pavilion, a cracked sundial, and a low altar barely visible under a creeping fig vine. And there are the deer, so many. 8 of them are already dozing beneath the fig tree. A few more lie belly down in the shade of the shrine. One stands halfway inside the pavilion, tail twitching lazily as she blinks at nothing in particular. You make your way carefully across the uneven stones, stepping around a doe who doesn't even bother to move when you pass. She trusts you, or she's asleep, or both. You take your seat beneath the overhang and unroll a copy of the midday Pradakshina verses. It's short, a series of walking prayers traditionally done in circles around a sacred object. But here, instead of circling the shrine, you're just sitting in stillness. The deer do the circling for you. As you begin to chant, your voice is low, rusty at first. Om Mani Padme Hum. It feels strange to speak aloud again after so many silent tasks. But the words are familiar. They don't belong to you. Exactly. You're just borrowing them. Halfway through the first verse, a deer walks in front of you. Then another. They don't break stride. Don't make a sound. Just pass slowly, as if pacing your syllables. It becomes a sort of dance. Your voice weaving between soft steps and the shuffle of hooves on leaf-strewn stone. One monk called this the moving mandala, a living pattern of breath, word, and motion, a walking prayer drawn with legs instead of ink. You reach the final line. Silence follows, and then a sneeze. You don't have to look. You already know it's Bhanu. The monks say he has seasonal allergies. The deer, of course, refuse to confirm. You smile and close the scroll. That afternoon, back in the storage room, you help sweep the old manuscript cases. It's simple work. Dust, fold cloth, replace oil stones to keep out pests. But as you open a chest near the back, something strange catches your eye. It's a painted panel, old, faded nearly to monochrome, but still visible. A scene. A monk, seated cross-legged beneath a banyan tree. A deer beside him, head bowed. Between them, a bowl. You look closer. The bowl is filled with water, and the water reflects the sky. Tiny birds are painted above. One of the deer's ears is painted white. You blink. Surely a coincidence. But later that evening, as the sky turns lavender and smoke from the kitchens curls above the rooftops, you see her again. The white-eared doe, standing at the edge of the banyan grove, watching you. You don't call out. You don't move. She turns and walks into the trees, and you follow. She leads you down a path you've walked before, but it looks different now. The stones are wet from recent rain. The leaves seem louder beneath your feet. The deer's steps are slow, measured, like punctuation in a sentence only she knows how to finish. She stops beside a low stone wall. You don't recognize it until you do. The outer shrine, the same one she led you to days ago. But now, there's something else. A bowl, carved into the stone, shallow, weathered, still holding rainwater. You kneel beside it. Look in. The sky is reflected there, clouds drifting across the surface, broken only by the soft ripple of your breath. The doe doesn't wait this time. She turns and walks back toward the monastery. You stay, just a little longer. When you return, the monks are finishing dinner. A few deer linger near the edges, licking plates, chewing banana peels, nuzzling novices. No one asks where you went. They already know. That night, Bhanu lies beside your mat again. He's closer this time. You can feel the warmth of his body against your arm. You don't move. You don't need to. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. Section 13. When the king sent a tiger, a royal gift leads to difficult decisions and a mysterious deer disappearance. You're roused early today not by a bell, or a hoof to the ribs, or even Bhanu's nasal breathing, which you've grown oddly fond of, but by a flurry of whispers. Something is different. Monks are walking quickly, not hurried, but purposeful. Their robes rustle like paper lanterns in windless air. There's no chanting, no kitchen clatter, just the steady murmur of preparation. You rise and follow the current, toward the courtyard, toward the east gate, and that's where you see it. A gift, not wrapped, not labeled, but unmistakably royal. A wooden cart, lacquered in red and gold, pulled by 4 oxen, flanked by soldiers and temple aides. The gift is inside. A tiger, caged, but calm, resting, breathing. A letter, affixed with wax, hangs from the bars. From His Majesty, for the protection of your grounds. The monks gather silently around the cart. One steps forward and bows. Another reads the letter aloud. The words are formal, ornate, soaked in euphemism. But the message is clear. You care for animals. Care for this one. Banu is standing nearby. His ears are sharp. Alert, you think he understands. The others begin to move, restless. The deer know. Something primal shifts in the air, like the breath before a storm. The abbot thanks the royal envoy. The cart is unhitched. The cage is rolled into the outer courtyard, and then the decision begins. Not with debate, not with shouting, but with quiet disagreement, layered like sediment. Some monks believe it's a test. Others think it's a punishment in disguise. Still others say it's an opportunity to show the depth of their compassion, even toward a predator. But underneath all of it is one truth, spoken only once and barely above a whisper. We cannot keep the deer safe with him here. You spend the morning helping reinforce the outer gate. Not out of fear, just precaution. The tiger sleeps the entire time, curled like a striped statue, chest rising and falling with calm inevitability. Kamalananda sits beside him for a while, just watching. They are beautiful, he says, even when they are trouble. That night, the tiger is moved to the outer shrine, not inside the cage anymore, but within a bamboo enclosure built quickly from fence slats and woven reeds. He doesn't protest. He yawns, stretches, and lies down. The deer don't come near, not one. Banu watches from the far end of the herb garden, body taut, hooves planted. Something in the monastery tightens, not fear, not anger, something quieter, something like sorrow. And then, the morning after that, just before sunrise, the tiger is gone. No blood, no struggle, no broken bamboo, just absence. A trail of paw prints, a piece of torn cloth, and the fact that 3 deer are missing. The monks gather, no words, just the bell, a single, slow chime. The deer herd is quieter that day. The monks, too. Meals are prepared but half-eaten. No chants rise at noon. No incense burns. Kamalananda walks through the gardens, one hand trailing across the tall grass like he's searching for something he dropped long ago. He passes you, pauses, and says, "This is why we don't keep tigers." The letter from the king is folded and stored with the scrolls. The cart is dismantled, the enclosure torn down. The paw prints fade, but the silence remains. And in the days that follow, the deer change, not dramatically, just slightly. They keep to the corners. They sleep in tighter circles. They look twice before drinking from the lotus pond. The monks change too, not with blame, not with bitterness, but with remembering. Banu walks more slowly now. He rests closer to the banyan roots. He watches everything. And you begin to understand that compassion isn't soft. It doesn't mean turning away. It means holding still while grief walks through the garden. and knowing it will return. Section 14. The pollen season of mischief. In spring, even monks struggle to stay serene as young deer leap through laundry. Spring passes into early summer, though the monastery doesn't mark the seasons with calendars or solstices. You notice it in other ways. The stone paths stay warmer after dusk. The neem leaves grow more fragrant. And the deer, the young ones especially, become impossible. There's no gentler way to say it. They leap through the kitchen herb beds, flattening basil with joyful abandon. They knock over prayer lamps with accidental tail. One particularly excitable fawn has made it her mission to climb onto everything: baskets, porches, and once, the abbot's meditation cushion. He did not move. He just waited for her to jump off. This is the pollen season of mischief. A phrase Kamalananda repeats with a sigh and a smile at least 4 times a day now. You begin to hear it whispered like a mantra anytime something goes flying across the courtyard. Today, you're tasked with hanging new laundry cords. The old ones were chewed through, not all at once, just progressively, over several mornings, by a clever young buck with an affinity for fraying rope. You string the new cords higher, hoping to keep them out of reach. You should have known better. By noon, 3 robes are already on the ground, and a deer is attempting to wear a sash like a scarf. Bhanu watches from a distance, unimpressed. You find him later standing at the edge of the library steps, head tilted, staring at a scroll that someone left unrolled. He doesn't touch it. He just stares, then walks away. Kamalananda joins you as you gather the robes. They do this every year, he says. Every single one of them forgets they're not supposed to leap onto the ceremonial altar. He points across the courtyard where 2 fawns are hopping in and out of a shallow fountain meant for ritual foot washing. You'd think they'd learn. You look at him. They have learned. You say, they just don't care. He chuckles. That too. In the mid-afternoon heat, most of the monastery naps, even the deer. They tuck themselves into the shade like folded blankets. One lies directly beneath the bell tower, chin on her hooves, looking up at the sky as if waiting for it to say something interesting. You find a moment of stillness near the outer wall, watching a pair of deer chase each other in tight, dizzying circles. Their hooves strike sparks on the stone path. Their breath clouds in the air, even in the heat, and then one of them stops, walks to you, and drops something at your feet. A rope, frayed, stolen from the laundry cord you strung this morning. You pick it up. The deer blinks, and you swear she's waiting for praise. The monastery doesn't punish the deer. There's no shaming, no shouting, no wagging of fingers. When something is broken, it's repaired. When something is eaten, it's replanted. When something is taken, it's laughed about over lentils. That evening, during the dusk bell, you see something unusual. Bhanu is running, not from fear, just running, across the long corridor, through the gate, out into the garden with surprising speed for a creature of his size and dignity. The other deer follow. The monks pause. No one gives chase. No one calls out. It's not panic. It's play. Moments later, they return in a flurry of hooves and tails and panting breaths. Bhanu stops in the center of the courtyard and turns his head sharply twice as if signaling you're next. You stay on the step. You are not next, but you laugh anyway. That night, under a pale yellow moon, the deer are calm again. Their mischief seems to burn off like morning fog. Bhanu lies near the shrine. The young ones curl into each other like commas in a sentence they haven't quite finished writing. You lie on your mat, arms behind your head, eyes half open, and you wonder, was the mischief ever mischief? Or was it joy, folded into fur and hoof, reminding you that reverence isn't always quiet? You fall asleep before the question finishes. Section 15. Deer as watchers of vows. Some monks confess only in the presence of deer who blink, chew, and seem to understand. It starts with a rumor passed quietly between novices, whispered at the herb racks, muttered during dish duty. There's going to be a confession, not just any confession, either. A vow confession, spoken not to the abbot, or the elders, or the assembled community, but in front of the deer. You blink when you first hear it. This isn't part of the official schedule. It's not even in the Vinaya texts you've read, but everyone seems to know what it means. You ask Kamalananda, who's sorting lotus stems by candlelight. He nods slowly. It happens when words are too brittle for people. He doesn't say more, just adds another petal to a bowl of cooling water and hands you a knife to help. That evening, as the sun begins to sink behind the outer ridge, the courtyard grows strangely still. The monks gather not formally, not in rows, but in slow, quiet rings, all facing the central shrine. No lamps are lit, no bells are rung, just the hush of bodies folding into stillness. And the deer arrive, first 2, then 5, then more. They step softly over the flagstones, weaving through the seated monks with the reverence of creatures who know they are not guests, but witnesses. The one who will speak kneels at the base of the old banyan, head bowed, robe slightly askew, a novice not much older than you, hands trembling. You don't know his name. You don't know what brought him here. You don't need to, because when he begins, it isn't loud. It isn't even particularly clear, but it's honest. His voice breaks. He fumbles, pauses, and then one of the deer steps forward. Not Bhanu, a smaller one, pale fur, quiet eyes. She stands in front of him, not close, just near enough, and waits. He continues. Words about distraction, about failure, about wanting to run away, about falling asleep during prayer 3 nights in a row, about stealing 2 jackfruit balls meant for guests. There are chuckles, but no mockery. He finishes with a long, ragged breath. The deer lowers her head, licks his hand, and walks away. Nobody claps, nobody chants, nobody says a word. The confession is accepted not because someone says so, but because the deer stayed. Later, you ask Kamalananda why the deer matter so much in that moment. He thinks for a long time before answering. They don't judge, he says. They don't remember yesterday. They only know what's in front of them. If they stay, you're still whole. Historians barely acknowledge this tradition. The most generous references call it symbolic mindfulness practice. Others dismiss it as folklore with fur. But those who've seen it, truly seen it, don't argue, because they remember what it feels like to speak your worst truth and be forgiven with a blink. A few nights later, you find yourself seated at the edge of the garden, your own heart heavier than usual. You've made no grave error, but you've doubted. You've grown impatient with your chores. You rolled your eyes during evening chant. You snapped at a monk when he corrected your posture. You haven't told anyone. You don't need to. You whisper your apology into the air, barely louder than the wind. A deer walks past, stops, turns, touches her nose gently to your shoulder, and then walks on. You feel no lightning, no thunder, just the slow loosening of a knot you didn't know you'd tied. That night, sleep comes quickly. And in your dream, a deer leads you through a field of blooming night jasmine. Every flower opens as you pass. You don't look back. You don't need to. Section 16. When the herd walked out, a silent protest. 30 deer vanish overnight. The monks blame themselves. Historians still debate why. Sometime around your second month in the monastery, you're asked to deliver cloth to a part of the compound you've never entered before. The old wing, the monk says, handing you the bundle. The west corridor, past the grain storeroom. You hesitate, not out of fear, just surprise. You'd thought no one used that part of the monastery anymore. And you'd be mostly right. The path there is different, quieter, somehow heavier. The stone floor shifts slightly underfoot, smoothed not by recent sandals, but by centuries of them. The doorways are narrower, the ceilings lower. Even the air smells older, with that sweet dry scent of camphor, dust, and the faintest trace of ghee lamp smoke long since extinguished. The cloth in your arms is soft, dyed pale saffron, meant for ritual hangings that are rotated with the seasons. No one says why they need replacing now, but you don't ask, you just walk. And the deer follow. Not many, just 2, one with a scar on her side. The other still young enough that her hooves sound uncertain on stone. You glance back. They stop. Wait. Then continue, as if they know where you're going better than you do. The grain storeroom passes by, quiet as always. And then you reach the west gate. It isn't locked, but it creaks in protest when you push it open. Beyond it, silence. No monks, no birds. Just hallways that seem to hum faintly, not with sound, but with memory. You walk slowly, past niches in the wall that once held lamps, past murals so faded they're more suggestion than image now. One still shows a circle of monks seated around a deer. The deer's eyes are the only part still vivid. You find the shrine where the cloth belongs. It's barely more than an alcove, an old relief carving of a bodhisattva framed by stone deer on either side. Their noses are chipped, their ears smoothed away, but they're unmistakable. You hang the cloth carefully. It drapes with the gentle weight of ritual, a little crooked, maybe, but you don't fix it. Something about the imperfection feels right here. When you turn to leave, the deer are gone. You didn't hear them go. You make your way back through the west wing. Slower now. In one room, you find a stone basin with water still pooled inside. Perhaps rainwater. Perhaps memory. You kneel beside it. A hoof print rests on the ledge. Old. Pressed into dust that hasn't been swept in years. Back at the main courtyard, the sky has turned the color of faded marigold. You arrive just as the evening bell sounds. A few monks are gathering near the banyan. Someone is placing petals around a worn clay bowl. Others are lighting lamps soft, flickering halos that make the deer's coats glow gold. You find Kamalananda watching the ceremony from a bench nearby. Do they ever go into the old wing? You ask. He doesn't answer right away. Then, only when we forget something important, you think of the shrine, of the cloth, of the hoof print on the basin. What did we forget? He smiled. Not a big one, just the kind that makes his eyes crease like old paper. How to listen to silence. The deer walk through the gathering slowly, hooves padding soft as breath. One stops beside the flower bowl. Another circles the outer ring of monks before lying down with the ease of someone who has always belonged. You sit at the edge of the lantern light, arms resting on your knees, and you understand something. The old wing isn't abandoned. It's resting, waiting for someone to walk quietly enough to hear it again. You lean back against the stone wall, close your eyes. and let the hush of forgotten corridors and careful hooves lull you toward sleep. Section 17. Deer footprints on old manuscripts. Some of the oldest palm leaf sutras show tiny hoof smudges, accident, or ancient signature. The monastery has a tradition that isn't written down, not in the scrolls, not in the codes, not even in the stories passed between novices while they're washing rice or oiling lamps. But it's there. You discover it while helping to dust the archive shelves specifically. A tall one in the east wing where the oldest palm leaf bundles are stored. You're standing on a stool made of 3 uneven bricks, balancing a cloth in one hand, holding your breath for stability. When you reach the very top shelf, you find it, not a book, a palm leaf, just one, cracked, split, warped with age. No twine, no title, but on its surface, inked in clumsy lines. Smeared and faded is a row of tiny hoof prints. No script, no signature, just hoof prints. You bring it down, carefully, almost reverently, and you ask the archivist monk if he knows what it is. He holds it in his palm, runs a finger over the edge. He says, "Dear footnotes." You blink. He doesn't laugh, doesn't explain. He just returns the leaf to the shelf with an oddly affectionate smile. Later, Kamalananda tells you more. Sometimes, he says, a deer walks across a drying manuscript, or knocks over an ink pot, or chews the corner of a prayer scroll. You nod. You've seen it. But sometimes, he continues, they just leave a mark. On purpose. You wait. He looks up at the sky, the way he does when he's about to say something possibly heretical. Some of us think they're editing. The idea sounds absurd. And then you think about it. The misplaced hoof prints on ceremonial scrolls. The ink trails in patterns too consistent to be accidents. The pages monks refuse to recopy because of what they call divine margins. You begin to notice more. A meditation chant with one line smudged, rewritten slightly crooked. A blessing prayer with a gap in the middle exactly the size and shape of a deer's hoof. A Vinaya code page with a doodle, yes. A doodle of a deer nibbling on a novice's sandal. You ask a senior scribe about it. He raises an eyebrow. Deer don't follow the rules, he says. But they seem to know where they should be. You start looking differently at every scroll you help unroll. Not just for words, but for marks. Interruptions. Smudges. Traces of pause. The deer don't stop being curious, either. You catch Banu nosing through the poetry section one evening. He flicks past 3 scrolls and stops at a 4th, an obscure verse about impermanence and bananas. He sniffs the page, then sneezes on it. You mark the page with a thread. That night, at dinner, one of the younger monks recites the banana verse during chants. Coincidence? Probably. But still, you can't help but glance toward Banu. He chews slowly, blinks at you. There's another theory that gets whispered among novices, one even Kamalananda won't admit to believing, that some of the deer are reincarnated monks. They remember verses. They recognize places that haven't been used in decades. They follow the rhythm of ceremonies that no one taught them. You're skeptical, and yet there's a particular young buck who always shows up just as the scroll inventory ends. Every single time, he waits by the corner shelf, tail flicking. Once, he nudged a forgotten scroll into view that no one remembered cataloging. The monk overseeing the archive muttered, "Of course it was that one," and wrote it down. You begin to think of the hoof prints not as damage, but as commentary, a kind of living gloss, added not by scholars, but by four-legged editors who refuse to stay quiet when a verse feels unfinished. One night, you find a deer lying beside a newly written prayer. The ink is barely dry. She doesn't touch it. She just breathes. When you pick up the page the next morning, you see a single, perfect indentation pressed into the margin. No ink, just presence. Just enough to say, "This line matters." You save that page, fold it carefully, and tuck it beneath your mat. Section 18. The funeral of a beloved stag. A deeply moving ceremony unfolds under banyan trees, with garlands and tears both shed. There is no schedule for grief here, no bell for it, no set verses to chant. It arrives the way a summer storm does, without warning, and too heavy for umbrellas. You find out in the quietest way. It's late afternoon, and you're gathering fresh neem leaves for the kitchen fire when you hear two words passed in hushes through the herb garden. He's gone. You don't ask who. Not yet, but something clenches in your chest before you even know the name. The monastery walks softer that day. Even the deer, usually careless in the way of the innocent, seemed to step more slowly. It was a stag. One of the older ones. Not Banu, but one of his age mates. A tall, dark-coated buck who'd recently taken to watching the novice scroll readers with a suspicious intensity, as if he could spot weak phrasing from across the courtyard. You never knew his name. Some called him Lamp Topper, because he'd once tried to nap in a lit oil lantern and singed off a portion of his tail. You'd never seen him run. He walked with dignity, nose high, like he remembered being a king or a librarian. You find him beneath the turmeric tree. He's lying on his side, still, peaceful. A few petals have already drifted down from the overhanging blossoms to settle in the fold of his front legs. A monk kneels beside him. He's not crying. He's placing a bowl of sandalwood water next to the body, and around them deer, 5 of them, maybe 6, standing in a loose ring, not agitated, not alert, just present, watching, breathing, guarding. The monks do not touch the body until the deer step back. Then the ritual begins. There's no grand ceremony, just a cloth, a bowl of camphor smoke, a strand of marigold offered from the elder gardener's hands. The body is carried, not lifted, carried, by 2 monks and 3 novices, to a grove beyond the main walls. It's not a burial ground, not exactly. Just a place where soft things are allowed to return to soil gently. You walk in silence, not ordered, but instinctual. A line of monks, a quiet ripple of deer, one behind, one beside, one ahead. Banu walks at the front. His hooves don't make a sound. At the grove, a pit has already been dug shallow, careful, lined with banana leaves. The body is lowered, petals scattered. One monk recites verses, another hums a melody with no known name. The deer do not cry. They breathe. They stand close enough for their warmth to reach your fingers. And then after the monks bow, after the soil is replaced, after the cloth is folded and pressed into a niche in the tree's trunk, they walk away, not quickly, not solemnly. Just gently, you stay behind. You sit beside the grave. You trace a spiral in the dust. Kamalananda joins you, holding a gourd of water and 2 slices of honey-soaked bread. He was a good listener, he says. You nod. Never interrupted the scroll readings. Never stepped on a mat uninvited. He offers you a slice. You take it. Then you ask, "Do you name all of them?" He chews slowly, then says, "No, but we remember who they were." You think about that. Later that evening, The monks gather around the banyan for tea. The deer, too, curl in the grass, their coats gleaming under the lamp glow. And someone recites a verse not from the sutras, but from an old story scroll. He who walks without a sound leaves the loudest echo. No one names him, but everyone hears it. You lie on your mat that night and feel the absence. Not like a hole, but like a door left open. The wind passes through differently now. You watch Banu from a distance. He's standing near the herb garden, alone, still, and you whisper, "I'll remember him." A deer near your mat lifts her head, just once, and lies back down. Section 19. The quiet that followed. After loss, the monastery learns to listen harder to wind, to footsteps, to memory. The monastery breathes differently after loss. It doesn't grieve loudly. There are no weeks of mourning, no special colors to wear, no formal announcements, just a quiet shift, a hush that stays longer in the mornings, a longer pause before the evening bell, a softer way of speaking, as if not to wake something that has already gone back to sleep. You notice it in the way the deer move now, closer together, tighter clusters, more lingering near the banyan roots and the herb garden corners. Even Banu walks with less swagger, more thoughtfulness, like a monk who's found silence after too many words. Today, you're sent to repair the stone steps behind the old fountain. A simple task. Remove the moss, reseat the loose bricks, sweep away the centuries. But the moss grows thick here, so thick that when you peel a mat of it back, you uncover not stone but wood, an old plank, smoothed by time, ink-stained. You call Kamalananda. He kneels beside you, tilts his head, says nothing. You lift the plank together. Beneath it, a hollow space, not large, just wide enough to hold a clay scroll case, sealed with wax and wrapped in faded red thread. Neither of you speak. You carry it to the archive. The wax is brittle. The thread breaks softly. Inside, a scroll, cracked at the edges, but intact. The writing is spare, almost minimalist, but unmistakably old. You read it slowly. It's not scripture, not a king's order, not even poetry. It's a ledger, a quiet one, a record of deer, not numbers, names, descriptions, favorite foods, preferred napping spots, odd habits, a note beside one. This one listens when the bell rings, but only bows if there's wind. Another eats only after someone else has. Never first, never last. A list of lives, inked into permanence. You realize the ledger spans decades, maybe longer. Multiple hands, different scripts. Some names repeat Banu, of course, though likely not your Banu. Another simply marked old one with ears like dry leaves. You bring the scroll to the abbot. He holds it the way one might hold a sleeping bird. "Ah," he says. "So it wasn't lost after all." You ask who wrote it. He doesn't answer, just smooths the edge of the scroll with his thumb and says, "We all do, in pieces." That evening, a new section is added. You write it yourself, your hand a little shaky, trying not to smudge the ink. The one who stepped in lantern light and never blinked, preferred to listen, never interrupted, rested near the turmeric tree, now part of the wind. When you return the scroll to its case, you place it not on the shelf, but in the quiet alcove near the banyan, where the deer nap, where the air always smells faintly of smoke and marigold. The next morning, the air is thick with mist. The garden stones are damp. The deer are slow to rise. You're brushing dew from the laundry lines when you see something unusual. a young fawn barely old enough to walk with grace standing beside the scroll alcove. She sniffs the clay tube, taps it once with her nose, and lies down beside it. You don't interrupt. You just watch. Later, Kamalananda says, they know when the names are spoken. You sit with that for a long time. That night, you join the silent chant in the western grove. No voice, just breath, just a rhythm of presence. The deer gather slowly. One stands behind you. You don't turn around. You don't need to. Section 20. How the tradition faded but didn't die. Some still keep deer today, in honor more than habit. The legacy lingers in quiet places. Time, like mist, doesn't leave hard edges here. You don't know exactly how long you've been at the monastery. The days blend together like watercolor on old parchment, a soft fade from one moment to the next. You've stopped counting sunrises. You've started counting deer. Not all of them, of course, just the ones who linger, the ones who lie near the bell tower when it rains, the ones who inspect your breakfast bowl before you've taken the first bite, the one who insists on stealing the same sandal every third day. And Banu, always Banu. Tonight, the monastery is unusually quiet, not hushed like during grief, just still, like it's listening. You sit near the outer path, where the wind moves in slow ribbons across the grass. A few lanterns flicker by the walkways. The stars are faint, as if reluctant to intrude. Banu lies beside you, head resting on his front legs. You can hear his breath, and your own, and then a sound not quite footsteps. Softer, you look up. A procession, small, unannounced, just 6 monks, walking side by side, each holding a single folded cloth. They head toward the Old West shrine. No words are spoken. You rise. Follow. Banu follows. 2. When you arrive, the door has been unlatched, the interior swept. Oil lamps flicker on the corners of the ancient stone. One by one, the monks step forward and place their cloths, each dyed a different shade of ochre, each embroidered with a single thread. Not symbols, names, familiar ones. The deer enter behind you, not all at once, not led, just present. One by one, they curl up beside the wall, or the steps, or the base of the stone deer statues. A circle forms. Monks, deer, memory. You are handed a lamp. Not told what to do, you kneel and place it in the center. It flickers once, then steadies. A monk begins a soft chant low, breath-bound, more wind than voice. You join in. You don't know all the words, but that doesn't matter. Because the deer know. They close their eyes, not asleep, just listening. Somewhere behind you, Kamalananda whispers, not every life becomes history, but every presence becomes echo. You nod. The light fades, but not completely. The lamp glows softly in the dark, throwing shadows on the stone deer that almost look like movement. Banu stands, walks to the center, lowers his head, and stays there, just long enough for silence to become something deeper. That night, you lie awake on your mat, the scent of oil smoke still clinging to your sleeves, a deer's warmth at your back, and something in your chest quiet, rooted, and vast. You close your eyes. You dream of hoofprints on dry soil, of bells that chime without sound, of a monastery that remembers everything, even the things no one writes down. So now, as you rest beneath your blanket, let all of it fall away. Let the soft shuffle of hooves drift across your thoughts, gentle and unhurried, Let the rhythm of quiet lives and leaf-shadowed paths hum at the edges of your breath. There's no need to hold on to the names, or the places, or the whispered chants that curled through the dark. They were never meant to stay sharp, just soft, just present. Because somewhere, there is always a garden where deer step softly between doorways and monks breathe in time with trees. Somewhere, an old scroll carries a hoof print like punctuation. Somewhere, a stone bowl still catches rainwater that reflects the moon. And you curled beneath your own sky tonight are part of that quiet. Nothing demands of you now. Not speech, not effort, just rest. Let your fingers uncurl. Let your shoulders sink just slightly more. Let your breathing match the rhythm of the night. The way Banu's did, as he watched the lantern light. The way the fawn did, as she slept beside the turmeric tree. Let the world fall gently around you, like flower petals in a slow wind. And let it hold you there, exactly where you are, exactly as you are. You're safe here. You're not alone. And it's time to sleep.